started, we're going to talk about educations and actions for a sustainable future. And what I'm really going to do is talk about what is educating for a green and sustainable future. What are our sustainability challenges that we have as a society? What are the national trends that are occurring to create solutions to those sustainability challenges? And then what solutions exist? And what resources are available for you so that you can reduce your cost of living, improve your quality of life, help to create sustainable abundance for yourself and for those around you, as well as for society as a whole. So this is the most commonly recognized definition of sustainable development. It was done in consultation with over 1 million people in over 100 countries, and it came out of the Brundtland Commission. You'll notice that it says sustainable development is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And there's nothing there about saving the planet. In fact, this most commonly recognized definition of sustainable development is really centered towards human beings, isn't it? And the planet is going to be fine. It's just a question of which species are going to be able to live on the planet and with what quality of life. So if you have people in your organization who want to argue about what the definition is of sustainable development, or they don't even like the phrase because they don't like the word development, I say to you, put them in a subcommittee and let them argue it out. It'll take them usually about a year and a half, and they'll come back with some kind of modified definition. Meanwhile, you go ahead and start all your projects to help create a more sustainable future. And when they come back from their subcommittee, you'll be a lot farther towards creating a better society for us all. Now, business was one of the first sectors in the United States to call for a more sustainable future and for sustainability education. And they call sustainability the triple bottom line. Go look at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the US Business Council for Sustainable Development, the CSR wire. I mean, really, the triple bottom line is a common term. How many of you have heard of this triple bottom line before? Would you raise your hand so I know what I'm working with here? That's very helpful. Thank you. So the triple bottom line is about by making smarter decisions, more educated decisions, we can simultaneously create healthier ecosystems, healthier social systems, and healthier economies. So when people say to me, well, I don't understand, you have a degree in business and you have a degree in psychology and you teach business and psychology and renewable energies, how does that all fit together? My response is, well, of course it fits together. It feeds right into the triple bottom line of sustainability. The violation of basic human rights is an issue for sustainability. All of this diversity emphasis and formal education also fits into sustainability. Not only physical abuse, but emotional abuse is something that's addressed by the social well-being part of sustainability. That people shouldn't work in working conditions that are unsafe, in slave labor conditions where they work long hours and they don't make enough money to live on and they end up more in debt to the company at the end of the day than they were at the beginning of the day in sweatshops. None of that fits into the picture of the social well-being part of sustainability. So a lot of people think sustainability is just about environmental sustainability, and it's not. And there was this big aha in the early 1990s when the triple bottom line came in to more common awareness in the business community and the economic development community. Because we used to think that if we did something good for the environment, it had to somehow hurt our economy. But we started looking at the facts and the precedents and the history, and we found that wasn't true. Or if we did something good for human beings, that somehow that had to hurt the environment or hurt the economy. So now there's been this kind of aha. If we're smarter on our decisions, we can actually get to this triple bottom line. Businesses knew, and still know today, that if they're being socially or environmentally irresponsible, that the project that this is a part of, or their business as a whole, is worth less because they've taken on additional risk. So they started asking the business schools early on, give us people who can do not only a financial analysis of our business or our project, but a whole triple bottom line analysis. And if you haven't had the opportunity yet to read some of the annual reports or corporate sustainability reports, sometimes it's integrated right in with the annual reports, sometimes it's separate, of corporations. It's really worthwhile. It's a great educational experience about ways that we can get to the triple bottom line. One of my favorites, there's a book called Mid-Course Correction. It's written by Ray Anderson from Interface. He thought that he had this wonderfully successful business, and he realized that as a carpet manufacturer, he was really just leaving a toxic legacy. So he did a turnaround and made a decision to not only make his company benign to the environment and not harmful to the communities he was in and to his workers, but one more step, to be environmentally restorative to the community, to be regenerative to the people living in the community. You might call it economics as if people mattered, economics as if people and the planet mattered. How many of you knew where that came from? Schumacher's work from a long time ago, right? Okay, now this is the most commonly recognized definition of education for a sustainable society. This came from a number of world summits where they discussed this. I really like this definition for a couple of reasons I'll point out. Education for a sustainable society enables people to develop the knowledge, values, and skills to participate in decisions. Notice the emphasis on decisions that will improve the quality of life now without damaging the planet for the future. So, values. Any educator who tells you they have a value-free education has not thought deeply enough, because even the decisions we make about what to include in the classroom and the assessments and the learning activities, those are value-based decisions. So we might as well be explicit about our values, that it matters to be able to create a higher quality of life for people, that human suffering matters, and that when we can make improvements and reduce human suffering and reduce ecosystem degradation and build healthier economies, that that's a good thing. It's worthwhile being explicit about those values. The second thing is decisions. My husband came here with me. He's somewhere here. Hi, Dennis. There you are. So Dennis has been teaching higher ed for 43 years. I've been in higher ed full-time for 30 years, part-time before that. The whole time the emphasis here has been on critical thinking, right? Critical thinking. We're going to produce good critical thinkers. Well, when's the last time that you were in a meeting or you were at a dinner party or someplace else and the person next to you goes on and on and on about what's wrong with the world and what we need to do to improve it? They might even have a good analysis, and you just know they're not going to do anything. Has anybody had to deal with somebody like that? If you raise your hand if you had to deal with. Yeah, I think we produce a lot of people like that out of higher education, and they get probably good grades when they do a good analysis because we produced critical thinkers. But I have another name for those people. I call them armchair pontificators. And I don't think we can afford to graduate one more armchair pontificator. So a couple of things to recognize. Critical thinking hasn't always been the goal of higher ed. There was a lot, and if you look in your missions, it's in there too, about being able to contribute to a healthier community, a healthier society. Yet somehow, when the accreditation comes for the school, they don't ask too rigorously about that. They ask about the learning outcomes of our individual programs. They ask about critical thinking, but not about, can this person be a systemic thinker and an effective change agent? Because we have some changes we need to make. The other piece here is quality of life. So psychology has a lot of good research about what makes for a higher quality of life. So what do you think is the #1 indicator from the research of happiness in life? Once you can pay your basic bills, what is the #1 indicator of happiness in life? Any guesses? You can just yell it out. The number of relationships? The quality of the relationships. That's right. And I want to tell you that I have been I've given speeches where the audiences are filled with hundreds and hundreds of faculty members, and nobody knows that answer. What's wrong with our higher ed system if we don't even know what builds a higher quality of life? And have those discussions with our students about where does quality of life come from. So we're from Oakland County. That's where all the unemployed auto executives live. Right next door to Detroit. And my students consistently say, well, isn't it more money that makes you happier? Because they live in this community with big houses and big cars, and whether they own it or not, they think somehow that that's the happiness pathway. You know, we have career pathways, educational pathways, the happiness pathway. And when we start talking about what really makes quality of life, all of a sudden they get interested in learning the interpersonal skills to build quality relationships. We know how to build healthier relationships. So how many of you had to ever take a class? Was it required in your degree of how to build healthy relationships? Let me see, raise your hand. Nobody, one person. Okay, how many of you had to take algebra? Raise your hand. College algebra. When's the last time you used the quadratic equation? When's the last time you used the skills to build a healthy relationship? I want you to think about this algebra class for a second. What would happen? You know, algebra is a class that tends to throw a lot of people out of higher ed. They don't do well in it, they struggle with it, and then they don't come back. The statistics are sad. What would happen if we took algebra, and I've taught applied math that teaches the algebra and actually the trig and others for 22 years. And in that class, we taught personal finance and governmental and organizational budgets. How much more educated of a society would we have? What if we taught about sustainability challenges? You know, you got to teach about arithmetic and geometric growth rate anyway. Why not make it about population growth rate? Let's get rid of these problems, story problems. 2 trains are coming towards each other. So I think there's a lot we can do to start to redesign our curricula so that we can build higher quality of life and our personal actions and what's going on systemically across society. In fact, there's only 2 things we need to do to build a more sustainable future. And this comes from, it's a diagram my dear friend Richard Knob created for our National Science Digital Library. And in the center is what we do in education. We couldn't fit it all in the center, so there's more in there besides applied knowledge and technological skills, but that's education. There's only 2 things we need to do with education to create a sustainable future. One is we need to change some of our private habits. We have less than 5% of the world's population. We're consuming 25% of the world's resources. And when I go give my international speeches where I'm asked to represent the US and talk about what's going on, the rest of the world knows about this. Not everybody, but a lot of them. And regardless of what I say in my speech, they'll raise their hand at the end and say, what are you doing? You walk around talking about how great your lifestyle is, how everybody else should have the same lifestyle as you, and if everybody on the planet has the same lifestyle as you, we need 4 to 6 planets worth of resources. How many do we have? You sure about that? We only have 1. Yeah, we only have 1. And we're very wasteful. I'm not talking about being a martyr to live a sustainable lifestyle here. I'm talking about being smart about how we use our resources. So changing some of our private habits. The second thing we need to do is we need to change some of our laws and regulations. They are very outdated. They were generated at a time when we thought fossil fuels were absolutely harmless and absolutely wonderful and incredibly cheap. We didn't know at the time that when people showed up in emergency rooms with respiratory illness and asthma due to air pollution from coal-fired power plants, and we ended up paying for that. Uninsured people who show up at the emergency room, who pays for that? We pay for that. We didn't realize that that actually was the part of the price of turning on that light switch or turning on the air conditioning or the other electricity that we use that comes from coal, because it shows up in a different part of the bill. We didn't recognize that the subsidies for fossil fuels are like this and the subsidies for renewable energies are like this, and for energy efficiency even smaller, so that it's not a fair marketplace out there. So we need to change some of the laws and regulations. If we do those 2 things, change some of our habits and change some of the laws and regulations, we'll get to more sustainable economies and sustainable communities. Now, why is the ecosystem on the outside here instead of in this triple bottom line? Because everything we do is in the context of our ecosystems. With every breath we take, with every drink of water, we are receiving life-sustaining gifts from our ecosystems. And we haven't fully costed the value of that in. Now, I'm not saying that we should make water and clean air so expensive and energy that people can't live a decent quality of life. Oh no, that's where the education comes in, so that we can give basic quality of life and then build sustainable abundance with a real knowledge of what builds quality of life and the skill building to create it, while still taking care of our ecosystems for us as well as for future generations. So what are these challenges we have, these sustainability challenges, and the solutions? I promise not to leave you depressed. Why is this environmental stuff such a high priority? Because there's all sorts of statistics out there, as these are, showing that our ecosystems are threatened, in decline. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment shows that. Many, many other studies show that. I don't think there's anybody really disputing that who's really read the research. Now, there are people disputing this, that climate change is going on. And I'm not going to really talk about that tonight. But if you really question whether climate change is going on, I wish you could go with me to all of the scientific meetings and policy meetings and international conversations, at least so you would understand that the only place where human beings are questioning whether climate change is going on this planet is in the United States. That's not going on around the world, and they really can't understand why we don't get it yet. So all I can say is, if you don't think climate change is going on, would you please double check your sources? I'm not going to take the time to describe the basics. Climate change works like a solar greenhouse works. Climate change works like how when you have dark upholstery in your car and the sunlight comes in and gets absorbed by the dark upholstery, the pane of glass that doesn't let the longer wavelength infrared heat radiation go back out is like what our greenhouse gases do. It's really pretty simple in terms of understanding the science of that. And we have more CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere now than we have in the past 400,000 years. It's really not that hard to understand. We're already seeing disruption of the food chain. We're seeing more extreme weather events. We're seeing disruption of the water supplies. And if you think energy is an issue, water is even more of an issue. Many of you already know that. I live in Detroit, Michigan, and I've had to deal with West Nile. Now, that disease did not belong in the temperate climate of Detroit, Michigan. But with climate change, I have a friend right now helping a whole community in Panama move up, because of two reasons. One is they have malaria now where they didn't have it before, so they have to move up into even higher altitudes. And the other reason is because they're going underwater. I have people from colleges who say, would you please tell the rest of your audiences that we are going underwater? And 50% of the world's population lives on the coasts. So where are the international design charrettes on how we're going to relocate people in a more humane way, instead of building a wall between India and Bangladesh? And the Pentagon calls climate change a national security threat. The Pentagon reports call our sustainability issues a national security threat. Let me just, and I call climate change civilization disruption. I'm just going to tell you a story about Oberlin. So I don't know if you know David Orr, but he's been working on this stuff with us for a long, long time, and with many of you who are working on it here in the audience. So David has this city council where they are in Ohio, and they're going to design a sustainable community, not just teach it, not just model it at the college, but they're actually going to go out and do it, which is where we're seeing the national trends converge. And you know, half of the city council is like, great, Professor Orr, go for it. And the other half is, who are you? Who are you, you liberal nincompoop? So he went and got an official from the Pentagon. This guy comes in and says, look, if just a couple of bridges blow out over the Mississippi, you are going to starve here because you are so dependent on your food from California. I can show you where the disruptions would be in your energy lines, where you would not have heat, where you would not have the power to bring in the water you need. So your sustainability challenges we consider a security threat, and we can't cover the security threats of all the communities around the country. So you have to start living more sustainably. Whoa, the whole city council is now behind David Orr. It was great, and we're seeing more and more of that. So you can read more about this, but bottom line, whether it's climate change or the other threats we're doing to our ecosystems, we are the first generation capable of determining the habitability of the planet for humans and other species. And the decisions we make are crucial because our decisions are going to create either more scarcity and suffering, and the Pentagon, their reports are literally worried about scarcity wars, or a future of greater abundance and higher quality of life. So if you hung this up all over your community, you would just depress people. And I've seen communities where they've done that. We have to do something, look at all this that's going on, and the young people say things like this. The world's really screwed up. I'm going to try and make a lot of money and just go live in a gated community. Or, I think I'm going to go get some food, some water, I'm going to hoard it, and I'm going to be a survivalist. I'm going to survive. I mean, is that really what we want to create as the outcomes of educating people about this? No. So if I was going to hang this up all over, I'd put to the right of it, and there's a lot you can do about it. And then I'd put the websites for creating a sustainable future and engage people in solutions. First of all, let them see what their own footprint is. How many of you have calculated your own ecological footprint by going to myfootprint.org or some other place? About half of you. That's excellent. That's a real wake-up call, right? But really to emphasize that the solutions exist, that we can reduce human suffering and environmental degradation now while building stronger economies, and to have those conversations and not just conversations, because education to action is the key. I'm not going to spend the time to go through this whole slide. This comes from Tony Cortese, my dear friend who runs the President's Climate Commitment, American College and University President's Climate Commitment that I'll be talking about. But he says, you know, we have to move from the society we have, which produces toxins at the end of our product life cycles and pretends that the economic system is some science that can't be touched, even though it's already been touched and modified in all sorts of ways that produce unsustainable results. And that we can move to sustainable abundance, recognizing that we are interdependent on each other, even though we have a part of our culture is this independence. But we are interdependent with each other, and to recognize that and to build systems that'll create a culturally, biologically diverse economic system that acts as if people mattered, living off of nature's income instead of its capital so it can continue to exist in the future, non-polluting powered, higher quality of life future. So what are the solutions? Well, if you haven't read this book, I strongly recommend you go read it. And if you go to, it's called Plan B, Mobilizing to Save Civilization. He's actually got a new one out, Lester Brown. But if you go to his site, you can keep clicking on this book and you'll get all of the chapters for free. And the chapters at the end talk about what you as an individual can do. It's great to include in any course on any topic because it brings that essential question. Just imagine if we brought to every classroom this question: how can we use what we learned today? Let me say that again. How can we use what we learned today to help make a better society? So it's a great book. I recommend you read it. We need to engage in sustainability solutions, not just for the students, but for the public. So imagine what could become the norm. We have incredible potentials for renewable energies. That book that you read, and also the Stanford University Energy Institute, talks about how we can meet our needs with energy conservation and renewable energies. And I know you don't hear that a lot. And I know you hear funny things like clean coal that doesn't exist yet. Doesn't mean we shouldn't still continue the research, but let's not talk about things that don't exist and say we should count on them as a solution. But if you add up what we already have, there's so much that can already be done that actually builds economic health into the community. And I say that as somebody who's been teaching renewable energies for 30 years and before that owned an energy company where we did solar energy, but we also did energy audits. We worked with senior citizen complexes because lots of times those people were choosing between heating and eating. So we would go in and prioritize all the different ways that they could reduce their utility bills. My students do commercial energy audits. It's very typical for them to go in and show how you could save 40 to 60% on the utility bill and get higher returns on investment than anywhere else that business has invested their money, improving the profits of the company. So we have all sorts of benefits of sustainability. It reduces financial risk, it saves money, it builds college and community economic health, it improves physical health, it improves quality of life. Even if you don't think that climate change is going on, those things are worth doing anyway. And we have all sorts of opportunities, financing opportunities, manufacturing opportunities, and I know you have a transition town that started here in Hendersonville, yeah. That's very exciting, and you're part of an international movement of people who are working to make this shift. So think of the key thrust, the key outcome, and it's a 21st century learning outcome, is that we need sustainability perspective and skills, that our students, staff, and community members know how to and choose to be more environmentally, socially, and economically responsible in their adult roles as consumer, investor, worker, community member, and how they interact with government. So now let me share with you some of the national trends that are going on, and I really do I want to get into conversation. I know I was supposed to talk at you, but I really want to talk with you. So the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development was generated. It was based on the model of the UN Decade for Women, and we started with just a couple of handfuls of people. And we would go to mainstream leaders. Now, I'm telling you this because if you haven't done it yet with your transition town or your other sustainability efforts here, you can. We went to mainstream leaders, in this case, national leaders, and we said to them, here's what sustainability is. You are in a unique and important position to help create a sustainable future. We can't do this without you. We would like you to come to this meeting where we're convening other key, wonderful brains and hearts to work on this. We hope you'll come. And they came. So we convened them in the business sector, in the higher ed sector, in the K-12 sector, in the faith sector, in the youth sector. Actually, the youth were the ones who came to us and said, you're messing with our future. You get defensive when we come to talk to you. And one of them turned to me and said, Debbie, can't you do something about all those defensive people? Because we're trying to just help them build solutions. So a lot of the national networks you're going to hear today actually came out of a response to that request. So I'll give you just some tastes. In the K-12 sector team, we've created national standards for sustainability education. They're free, downloadable at the website. We also have webinars, and we co-sponsor those webinars with mainstream K-12 associations. We've created a national network of K-12 associations, the National Science Teachers Association, the Superintendents Association, the National Council of Social Studies, who, by the way, have endorsed the sustainability education standards, and a number of others. And we regularly meet to talk about how to catalyze sustainability so that it becomes the norm, so a teacher would feel uncomfortable if they weren't educating for a sustainable future. I'll tell you more about the higher ed one as we go along. There are extensive resources on this site. They're all free to you, and I encourage you to. And you know, you can join for free too as a group, so put that Transition Town and your other efforts up there so we can learn from them. The business sector, much of the business sector is on fire about this, some willingly, some unwillingly, but much of it moving in any case. If you haven't read about McDonald's Cradle to Cradle, you know, we're the only species that produces these toxins at the end of our product life cycles, and we walk around talking about how smart of a species we are. McDonough, who's an architect, came up with the idea that it should be cradle to cradle. There's never a toxic end for a product. It's just done with its useful life as that product, and now you can redesign it into something else. He designed our Ford plant in Detroit, where things are cleaner going out than they are going in. Benyus, if you haven't looked at Janine Benyus's TED Talk, you know TED Talks on biomimicry, go look. Many people just start to cry with appreciation and joy with how she talks about what nature can do and how we can learn from nature, how engineers went and looked at how snails got in and out of their shells and understood better how friction works and produced a prototype for a fan motor that was 40% more efficient than anything on the market. And that's just one example. She has many. Go look at the case studies of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. They'll tell you stories not only of businesses who become empowered to understand the triple bottom line, but students as well. So how many of you know the Nike story? Raise your hand if you know what the students did with Nike. Just one. Okay, so the students found out that Nike was using sweatshops with unsafe late working conditions and really long hours where they were more in debt to the company at the end of the day than at the beginning, or that the wages were so low they weren't livable wages. And they went to Nike and said, we're not going to buy your gym shoes anymore until you clean this up. And Nike said, we don't own those companies. Those are our suppliers. And the college students said, we don't care. You're buying from them, and we're not going to buy your gym shoes anymore until you clean it up. And they did. They're not 100% perfect, but they're way better than they used to be. And you can read the case story at that site. Not only that, but Reebok found out and went, whoa, we don't want to lose our sales. We're going to clean it up too. Now, I just went to the ladies' room before I started this speech in this beautiful auditorium, and I noticed that there was nothing on that stall door. When I go to the Science Center, the Hands-On Science Center in Toledo, Ohio, I learn all sorts of things about the universe in that bathroom stall. They have wonderful everybody reads what's on those stall doors. That's precious real estate. So one of the things you can do with your sustainability initiatives is get the stories, not of like a Mother Teresa type, but of local heroes, or of heroes that are like the people who are going to be going into those restrooms to hear about how they've made a difference in the world. I'll let you read more about what Sweden did with Natural Step, and they did a consensus building process through the whole country in multiple sectors. Hazel Henderson is stunning with her work on alternative economic indicators, and of course Amory Levin, the inventor of the negawatt, being published a lot in Harvard Business Review because it's so economically sound to go green with our energy resources. In terms of business, I think I've talked quite a bit about those trends. Do you know that over 1,000 mayors have signed the Climate Protection Agreement because they weren't going to wait for the federal government to do it? And you know that they're working, the 40 major megacities in the country have just joined with the Clinton Climate Initiative. A lot of great work going on there. But we have a lot of mayors who've made commitments to that, but they don't have the staff to do it. College students can help be that staff. I'll say more about that in a minute. I've talked about K-12. All of the different faith institutions talk about God's creation care. I went with evangelicals to the Hill and talked to Republican senators about God's creation care. And it was a wonderful moment for me to be a part of that conversation and hear how they connected on the need to be more sustainable. And then, of course, we have the youth. If you aren't sending your youth from this community to PowerShift, I strongly encourage you to do that. They spend a couple of days learning about energy and sustainability issues, and then they go to the Hill and they talk to their elected representatives. Because democracy only works when we're involved. And I happened to be on the Hill one day when these 4 young women come down the hall, and I said, how's it going? And they stood up taller and they said, we changed his vote. He said that people kept coming into his office and educating him, and he promised to change his vote, and they checked and he did. So engaging our students in that civic engagement is so important. You know, there are way too many educators and community members who are cynics. And you know what a cynic is? It's somebody who got disappointed by something and never could process through their emotions, and they shut down, and they've spent the rest of their life saying, oh, we can't do that, we tried it, it didn't work. We can't afford cynics to be our leaders and our educators. We have to be resilient. We have to be persistent. And I will tell you, I know it gets difficult, but I am an academic, but I'm really a 4th generation change agent. And about once a year, not anymore, but in the past, I used to have like one day a year, it was like, ugh, there's so much to do, and it's so difficult. And I'd call my mom, who's a third-generation change agent, and she would tell me two things I found very valuable. One was, Debra, remember, you can talk to anybody about anything. There is no hierarchy. It's pretend. The second thing she'd say is, well, I know it's difficult, Debra, but what made you think that it was going to happen so easily? What made you think we were only going to have to fight for this issue once? Let me give you a history of how far we've come. And then she would talk about how far we've come. So learning that resilience, learning the skills to be effective change agents, that's something we can be teaching in our educational systems. I'll talk more about that in a little bit because higher ed is taking a leadership role in this. And what does it look like? We're seeing sustainability being integrated into not just the mission of the college. Make sure you show up at that meeting where they discuss what the new mission is going to be. And throughout the curricula, and you're part of a North Carolina network of colleges that are doing this, and you're integrating sustainability into your technical programs. I also like to see it integrated into all your degrees, because we need sustainability literate and engaged graduates in the roles as not just the solar technicians and the automotive technicians, but as the policymakers and the business managers and the consumers and the investors, all of us. Do you really want to graduate somebody who's illiterate about our sustainability challenges and not able to engage in solutions? So we need sustainability across the curricula, in our research agendas, in our public awareness, because it's not just the students, it's the whole community. In the purchasing operations, you can read the rest of it up there. Student life, professional development is key, and community outreach and partnerships. Internationally, let me just give you a taste. In Sweden, it's a law, not only all undergraduates, it's from preschool all the way through college. They learn about sustainability. It's a high priority in the European Union. I could go on and on. If you haven't read the Earth Charter, it's kind of an interesting experience. I'm a US delegate to the World Federation of Colleges and Polytechnics, where we just started a sustainability affinity group because a couple of us said we should. And now we're collecting and sharing curricula on sustainability all over the world. And it helps you when you can leverage, look at what they're doing. We're behind. For those who can only live in a competitiveness paradigm, it's easy to talk about how we need this to be competitive. We're talking with the U.S. Department of Ed right now about the upcoming race to the top and the first in the world programs that they're looking at. And they see sustainability as a key component for us to be able to be competitive. In Japan, it's actually patriotic to live a more sustainable lifestyle. So in the US, we have these wonderful national trends. One is the Higher Education Association Sustainability Consortium. Look at their mission. They're committed to the advancement of sustainability throughout higher ed. Look at the organizations that belong. I know it looks like alphabet soup, so let me tell you what they are. These are the organizations, professional organizations for college and university presidents, academic officers, those who run the student activities, the boards of trustees, et cetera, the facilities guys, the business officers, purchasers, etc. We have all sorts of resources for you. You will have access, I believe, to this presentation, and there's live links throughout. We even worked on media strategies for sustainability because colleges and universities and oftentimes nonprofits get free access to the media and use it. So we give you strategies about how to make the most of that. And then we have DANS. DANS is the Disciplinary Associations Network for Sustainability. This is where the professors go. So we have all of these disciplines and more. In fact, we have a very large grant from the U.S. Department of Education to integrate sustainability education into the core STEM disciplines in order to improve STEM learning, to entice more young people to be interested in STEM careers, and to prepare them to answer the big questions we have in our society about creating a better society, a better future for all. So these groups have been working on curricula, including the textbooks. We started cold calling textbook companies about 5 years ago. This Dan's group passed a statement saying that we want to see in your revisions of textbooks, because textbooks get revised about every 3 years, an updating of the worldview so that it brings in our sustainability challenges and the potential solutions. I'm very happy to report that the very large textbook publishers, Pearson and Cengage and McGraw-Hill, are really looking at this now. They can use more reviewers, they can use more nudging, but they're moving in this direction. So promotion, tenure, accreditation. The academics also wanted to help inform our legislators so they can make better policy and inform the public so their civic engagement will be more educated. And to change our professional identities as an academic so it's not just about teaching our discipline, but our discipline in the context of making the world a better place. You can see their resources there. Make sure you scroll down on those pages. They're long pages so that you can include sustainability in your work, whether it's a course or it's daily activities or at home in your personal lifestyle. The American College and University Presidents' Climate Commitment, these are over 650 college and university presidents who've actually read the science and said, yes, we understand climate change is happening. They represent over 3 million students at their institutions. They have they've committed to 2 things, to measuring their greenhouse gas pollution and to eliminating it as quickly as they can, to literally shift off of fossil fuels. It's an amazing statement by all these college and university presidents. And in fact, now there's one in Scotland and there's one in Australia. 85% of the college and university presidents in Scotland signed within 3 months. So it's been very interesting to watch this grow. This first document, Education for Climate Neutrality and Sustainability, is great if you are involved at all at helping to get sustainability into formal education, because it shows all the different models across the country of what's going on. And I don't have time, but we can talk about it if you want more examples. This college, Blue Ridge Community College, is a member of ASHE. That means that everybody with a Blue Ridge Community College email can get into all of the resources there, but even if you aren't from the college, they have a free bulletin. You can search their digest, and you can go look at the examples, hundreds and hundreds of examples of policies, much of which you can export into the community, not just for the higher ed. We have so many examples of how sustainability is systemically being integrated across the whole institution and into the community, into the transportation, like UC Boulder. They give free bus passes to all the students, and then they didn't have to build a parking area. Saved them money, and of course, reduced pollution. Green computing. At UC Santa Cruz, the local organic farmers were too small to deal with the large anchor institutions like the hospitals and the colleges, and so the students set up a purchasing co-op. And then that got represented to those anchor institutions, and now the farmers can sell their goods. And we have a much higher percentage of locally produced organic food there than before. You know, the average piece of food travels how many miles before it's eaten? About 1,500, 1,200 miles. Average piece of food. How absurd is that? More energy going into its packaging and transportation than into its growing. And we're also seeing sustainability being integrated into the job descriptions. So at Cornell, at Lane Community, I love what Lane Community College has done. Somebody go tell your president, because I think they're out of town, right? Lane Community College, Mary Spildy, who was the chair of the board of the American Association of Community Colleges, turned to her whole staff and said, look, it's everybody's job to do sustainability. Go do something. Let me know what you're doing. And the place came alive with sustainability projects. So lots of examples. And on energy conservation, we've got campuses that are 100% of their energy is coming from renewables, and then they're selling the excess back to the grid. And it was installed with students, and it was cost effective. They got money from Bank of America at Butte Glen Community College. They did a combination of bonds. It's really fun. Sit down with your financiers. And if they won't do it, there's other alternatives. Green building, of course. Lots and lots of examples. Do you guys participate in Recycle Mania here in this community? There are great contests. They already exist. It's really easy to become a part of it. These are the learning outcomes for students, and dare I say for all of us, as individuals for sustainability? We should at least be able to define it, right? By the way, this was compared to other countries in a paper that we did, and we found that it was similar to the learning outcomes in other countries, same core pieces. Students should be able to explain how sustainability relates to their lives, their values, and how their actions impact issues of sustainability. If you're a community member and you're looking at this, the Northwest Earth Institute has a series of discussion booklets that are lovely for creating community discussions and awareness raising around this. Then, to look at our daily habits and our consumer mentality. One of my favorite learning activities is I have students write down everything they use between the time they wake up and when they get to school, and then put next to it, what do they know about whether it's producing toxins when it's being manufactured and transported to them, and how does it treat the people who work in the factories and who live around the factories. And they realize how much they don't know. Each student will be able to explain how the systems are interrelated. Oh, by the way, one piece about this last one. Wait a minute. Don't feel guilty about what you're not doing. It's a waste of time. Don't get down on yourself for not living more sustainably. It's a waste of time. Blame is a waste of time. Proactive problem solving is not a waste of time. So celebrate what you're doing and have fun thinking about what you might do next. But don't sit around feeling bad. It's a waste of time. Okay, we should understand how these systems are interrelated. Isn't it interesting how most of the time when you go after a college degree, they'll say things like, well, you got to take 2 social sciences and 1 lab science and 1 this and 1 that, and that's your general education core. And oh, by the way, when you get out, try and think in an interdisciplinary way, because all of our societal problems require interdisciplinary thinking. Do you know that that laundry list, that grocery list of 2 of these and 1 of these, that's actually a German model that we adopted according to the Carnegie Institute about 50, 60 years ago, and that before that, the Gen Ed core curriculum for all degrees was an interdisciplinary themed core. Maybe it's time to go back to that. A lot of institutions are looking at that. Most importantly, I would say of all of these, students have to learn how to be effective change agents. They have to learn how to make change. They have to learn to be resilient and persistent and handle rejection and analyze their mistakes so that they can try things again. There's a whole list of change agent skills that we've come up with I'll share with you, so that they can apply the concepts of sustainability to their campus and community and engage in the challenges and the solutions, not only on their campus, not only in their community, but in the world. Those are the learning outcomes, the core learning outcomes, and they match international declarations in other countries. So, one of the key things is to develop ourselves so we're more able to live a sustainable life and create a sustainable future. For faculty, I love doing this. I do professional development with faculty, and I give them this question. I say, okay, take a big idea you have to teach anyway in your class. And take a big sustainability idea. Now create a learning activity that includes both. You have 5 minutes, go. And I get this deer in the headlights thing. And within about 3 minutes, the room comes alive with people who have ideas for learning activities. And then there's this, oh, this isn't that hard to do. And then we have discussions about how would you create systemic change, now that you see how you can do it in your learning activities. But everybody else, take your job activities or your daily activities, think about how you can make them more sustainability oriented in your behaviors, but also in the practices and policies in the institutions you participate in. And then describe the actions you can choose to help build a culture of sustainability. So if we were doing a workshop tonight, that's what I would do with you. And I would shush, and you would talk for the rest of the time. Let me tell you some of what's come out of this. Few young people called MTV and said, you need more on sustainability on MTV. And the person who answered the phone said, hold please, and took them to the young guy who was working at MTV who was trying to do just that. And he said, I am so glad you called because I needed young people to call and tell us that. So give me a few more phone calls And I will take that information to my meeting, and from that came the Reduce Your Impact campaign on MTV, the Breaking the Addiction to Oil campaign on MTV. So part of this is about empowering our young people to participate in solutions and also empowering ourselves. There are lots and lots of colleges and universities where these learning outcomes have become a requirement for all courses. And just here's some of the examples. Some institutions, it's not a requirement, but what they did was go through and they identified all the courses that looked at sustainability in depth, and they put an S in the schedule of classes, and then if you took enough of those, you got a little notice on your transcript that you had a focus on sustainability. So guess what happened? The students went to those classes, and then guess what happened? The faculty went, whoa, wait a minute, I want to do that too. We have other colleges where they've added an extra credit hour onto any course. And that extra credit hour is for a project of real-world problem solving, service learning around real-world problem solving in the community. At our college, my husband and I, for 7 years, and wrote it up in the ERIC database, and now it's been replicated in colleges and high schools too. We have students in small interdisciplinary groups imagine positive scenarios for the future of society. You know, we get a lot of negative scenarios for the future of society, but to get positive ones, and they then tell the story of how we got from today to this positive future society using the discipline concepts that they're learning in class. And they have to teach the concepts to each other because if they conflict, they get marked down. And you know, you learn when you have to explain to somebody else. And then they present their scenarios. It actually is very easy to integrate into any class. You don't have to change what you're doing in the class. You only have to give up 1 day to listen to the students' presentations of their scenarios. And over again, there was a big aha because everybody's scenarios sounded the same. You know how we have you guys focused on diversity here in your schools? Tolerance of diversity, has that been a theme at all? Yes, no, maybe? Yeah, okay, it's a theme nationally. I would love to see us also focus on the commonality of human beings across all groups. Because the commonality of these positive scenarios, they were stunning. They were transformational to the students, to the faculty, and then we had Positive Futures Fair where we had organizations helping to create those futures come in and present and talk about career and volunteer opportunities. And the students would go, I had no idea that you could actually make a living while you were helping to do A or B or C, whatever it might have been. So these kinds of transformations are going on all over the country now. Hundreds of colleges are integrating it into their technology programs, into all of their disciplines, not just their technical disciplines. They're starting new programs in specific areas, you know, like the renewable energies. And we're seeing people who are learning, practicing how to be effective change agents, because it's not about just teaching knowledge. You know, the #1 things that employers ask for on their employer surveys that we take year after year after year after year, give us people who can work effectively in groups, interpersonal skills. Give us people who are proactive problem solvers, who can make effective change. So imagine if we connected the silos on campus and turned it into a living lab for the community. Imagine if we connected the silos of nonprofits and business and government, of faith institutions, of educational institutions in our community. And we used the campus and the community as a living lab for sustainability. And then we shared those things via the media, and it continued to engage the public. And I know you're working on that, and I want to hear more about it. To catalyze movement from fear or apathy or obedience to caring, effective involvement. Because part of education at its best is about teaching people how to have healthy self-concepts. And I'm not talking about false self-confidence, okay? This isn't one of those things. This is about how to have healthy self-concepts so you can have self-efficacy, you see who you can be in the world, and you have the skills to go out and build a higher quality of life for yourself and for others. We love doing that at OCC, not only for my master's in electrical engineering, who comes in and takes my courses in sustainability or renewable energies, but also for the kid who had to walk across the expressway to get to the campus, who's from Detroit, who's the first one who ever went to college. He actually doesn't know how to read very well or study very well, but he just won't stop coming because of this positive scenario building exercise. And once we've got him, then we help him with his study skills, building healthy self-concepts, expanding the picture of who they can be in the world and helping them move into it. And that is the essential instructional approach for sustainability education, is real-world problem solving for sustainability. All that money going into completion, it affects completion too. Imagine sustainability literacy and engagement for all students in all jobs. There's your list of change agent skills link if you want to see more on that. So key actions beyond the norm of how we normally think of ourselves and our roles. Work with your state energy office, work with your utilities, your news outlets, and others to motivate the public to take action. Convene sustainability partnerships to build a healthy green economy. We can get into the specifics of that. I want to. Have discussions about quality of life so that people understand more explicitly what their goals really are, and reach out to associations. We've done this. You don't wait for the builders or the contractors or the Chamber of Commerce to come in and take classes to learn how to go green. Go to where they are. Go give presentations. So you go to the local builders association. Or let me give the example of the electrical contractors. We have electrical contractors who are collecting unemployment in Southeast Michigan, actually all over the country, because they don't have construction to work on because construction has slowed down. Meanwhile, and I'll go back to Southeast Michigan, because of what we've put together in our utility structure, we have a 5-year payback on solar electricity systems. It's a 20% return on your money. That is easy to sell. The problem is that the electrical contractors aren't used to selling it. They don't understand that business model. We got heating and cooling contractors that are laying people off after the heating season because they don't understand the business model of how they can start a green division of their company, how they can expand their business, improve their profits, and hire our graduates while building a green economy. But you don't wait for them to come to you, because I'm telling you they won't, not in the numbers we need. You go to where they're going. You build relationships, partnerships with the associations that they already go to. Bring the speeches to them. Bring the seminars to them so that we can really build a green economy as if people mattered. I've talked about the MTV. I know that you're interested in how to reduce bills in your own house, and I could do a whole little presentation on that. Okay, here we go. You ready? I got a list of 101 ways, low cost, no cost, to save energy if you want it. But you can go to these websites. They're great. I've got a couple of others in here that you can go to. Caulk. Go caulk. Caulk. Weather strip. Lower the temperature on your hot water tank down to 120. Wrap your pipes. Have somebody come and weatherize your house and tighten your envelope. Cover up those windows. A good thermal drape has a high R value, it seals on 3 sides, and it has a vapor barrier in it. You can build them yourselves. I can show you how to build your own solar hot water heater out of low-cost recycled materials. So we can talk more about that if you want, but let me show you what else you can do. Whatever it is, whether it's at your house or whether it's in the campus or whether it's in the community, use it as a community demonstration. I used to call the local TV stations. And I'd say, when my students build solar collectors for their midterms and they bring them in, you know, they line them up on the hill, and then we would take temperatures and we would see what their output was, but I wouldn't stop at that. I would call the local TV stations and say, give me the newsroom. I have a great news story for you. And what they want to hear at TV stations, I've got a great visual. So we ended up on the 6 o'clock news a lot. Look how you can build your own solar collectors. Or I'd call up the radio station. Give me the newsroom. I've got a news story for you. We have information on how your listeners can reduce their utility bills and their pollution. I bet they'd be interested in that. Even before I became a PhD, Dr. Rowe, I was the energy doctor on the largest radio station in Detroit. And every time I got on, I'd take my lab and I'd say, we're having an open house night. Come and see. And that's how I got my students. That's how we built our program. So you don't wait for them to come. You generate the demand. And also, the colleges are the high credibility place from which to talk about how weatherization makes sense, how renewables can make sense. So we have a unique and important role to play to help educate the public so that they'll take those choices, because it's so easy to connect to a fossil fuel plant. You call up, you say, let me do it, you pay a few bucks a month. It's many more decisions to weatherize the house or to move to renewables. That's why it's important that the anchor institutions support that shift where it becomes cool. I saw the shift in my neighborhood where it went from the Hummer being cool to the Prius being cool. So recognizing shifting culture, the youth can help with it. There's all sorts of existing projects, national projects that they can build on locally. We have a free online matchmaking website that we can give you, open source technology. It's called Play a Greater Part. You can go see it. And imagine if you had college students or even high school students who went out and interviewed your local government, your nonprofits, your businesses, and said, we know you'd like to be more sustainable, but you probably don't have staff to do it. So from these lists of projects, what would you do if you did have more staff? And then post those projects on this website. It's kind of like a Match.com, but it's not for romance, it's for sustainability projects. And then the college students in additional classes, the high school students were appropriate, and pro bono professionals, volunteers in the community, can sign on to help with those projects. It's free. We made it for you as a gift. You can make your own cover to it. Let us know if you're interested. So there's key places to put sustainability into the college, into the community. I'm not going to go through all of these. And it's important to brainstorm systemic change. Please don't get caught on, whether you remember to take the bags into the store or not. I mean, it's a fun thing to try and remember. I have a terrible time remembering. I'm still working on it. But really to think systemically about how do we make systemic societal changes. Well, I've got some resources for you. For those of you who are really into this green technology side, you'll be able to click on all those. But I want to point out the SEED Center, the American Association of Community Colleges. Call it the Sustainability Education and Economic Development Center. We could have called it the Renewable Energy Center or the Green Center, but we recognize that it's not just green, it's the triple bottom line. This is what it looks like. And if you go to the seedcenter.org, you'll notice on the left that there's solar, wind, green building, energy efficiency, sustainability education. Next, it looks like we're going to do food and water, convening those experts, bringing in the best resources, vetting them. We also have a wiki where you can put things in and discussion groups. The drop down on from resources on how to build a quality green program kind of lays out what I was talking about tonight about convening and creating sustainable communities and not waiting for the students to walk in the door, not waiting for the employers to walk in the door, but actually teaching your students not only the technologies, but the assertiveness and the entrepreneurial skills so that they can go out and help that heating and cooling contractor expand their business, or the electrical contractor go into solar, or we actually have a project right now where we're greening the local chambers of commerce. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce doesn't get sustainability at all. They've been fighting it. It's because they have certain vested interests in there. The International Chamber of Commerce gets sustainability and has been a strong advocate, and a lot of the local chambers do too. Anyway, we have this process if you want to engage your students in going into local businesses to help them green. We've got additional resources for you if you want to take this communities approach. The communities section of the U.S. Partnership website is pretty delicious with pieces. You already have transition towns. I hope you're already hooked into the Smart Growth Network. And if you haven't seen, how many of you know what's going on in Cleveland? Raise your hand. Oh, let me just tell you about Cleveland. Ted Howard, who's a professor at the University of Maryland, went into Cleveland with a model that's now being replicated. And you look at the anchor institutions. In Cleveland, it's the academics, the academic institutions, the hospital, and the government, which is substantial. And they look at what they buy. And they look at what they're buying from outside of the community, which means they're exporting their money out of the community to get that. And they looked at what they could make internally instead in the community. And they started with 3 businesses with long-term purchase agreements because the anchor institutions knew that there was a demand: a laundry, year-round food production, and green energy production. And they took some of the really poor people in Cleveland, they've got a good supply there, and they taught them how to work in the company. They brought in professional managers to run the businesses, and they gave the workers an equity ownership in the business. It's a beautiful model for community wealth building, and that's the name of it, is communitywealth.org. So if you're just interested in reducing your utility bills and reducing pollution at the same time, there's a couple of good websites there for you, but I really want to encourage you to work on policy, because policy is needed to create the systemic shifts, and we just created a policy toolkit for college presidents and anybody else who's interested at AACC. It's not up on the website yet, but it will be. But these are, in terms of the green, the renewable energies, energy efficiency space, these are great places to go to get policy information. So that's there for you. There's also a community college alliance for sustainability, and it's working on exactly these kinds of things. How many of you know about this Alliance for Sustainability? Anybody? Yeah, it's going on right around you, so I really want to encourage you to connect. Stu Rosenfeld runs this. The website is there. You can see that you've got some nearby institutions that are involved. And it's pretty exciting what they're doing to build community wealth. So I know you're already busy. I know that you think you're not an expert in this stuff. Don't worry, nobody's an expert. We're all learning as we go. And it's not about being the sage on the stage. It's about being the guide on the side, learning with other people. It's okay to say, I don't know, let's go find out. I know you feel lots of times like you're putting out fires, you don't have time to do the right thing, and that the issues are complex, and that societal and environmental impacts are invisible and ignored, so how do you even raise awareness about it? But what I say to you is you don't have to know all the answers. Just keep asking the sustainability questions. Don't worry about getting it perfect. You perfectionists, let it go. Use the resources that exist. Learn from others to help you learn, grow, and implement. You're part of a wonderful international community of people who are trying to create a more sustainable future for everyone. And it's everybody's job. Look, at this point, doing nothing isn't benign, it's destructive. I got a guy he helped to create the largest buying of wind power in Pennsylvania like 15 years ago. His name's Don Brown. And I could tell you a whole bunch of stuff about Don, but he works at this ethics institute at Penn State. And he's been saying to me, Debra, you just have to tell people that if they don't do anything, they're killing people. I mean, if you look at what's going on with the environment, the #1 type of refugee is an environmental refugee. It's not okay to do nothing. They're killing people. So I only had the guts to do it once. And people came up afterwards. It was at a National Science Foundation annual conference, national conference. They came up afterwards. It really made a difference when you told me I was killing people. So I don't know, do what you want with that. But I can say for sure that it's destructive if you do nothing, and that you have an important role to play. Please don't take little steps. Change is uncomfortable. You know that, don't you? I mean, Professor Zients, he's this famous psychology professor. He's at Stanford now. He used to be at Michigan. And he did this whole stream of research that's built on other streams of research that shows that the familiar is comfortable, even when it's dysfunctional. And that change is uncomfortable, even positive change. So that feeling of uncomfortable that you get when you start to get out of your comfort zone, yay! Get uncomfortable so that we can really make the positive changes that are available to us. In conclusion, the public isn't educated enough about the energy and sustainability issues before us. We need that sustainability literacy and engagement in solutions for everybody. And we can't wait for technology to solve the answers, because it's about behavior change. It's about our choices. It's not just about technology. You're creating the future already with your daily decisions, and you're in a unique and important role to help create a sustainable future. There's all sorts of great materials and precedents to assist you in the path that you choose. as a private person, as an employee, as a community member, we can model and change consumption and investment, institutional and civic policies and behaviors to create a more sustainable future. So we can do this. In fact, people can't do it for us. We actually have to do this. I want to say congratulations. I mean, I kind of looked at the faces of the people who were out there today before I started. I have a sense that many of you are already effective doers, that you're really making efforts. So I want to congratulate you for what you have done. Even more so, I want to congratulate you for what you're going to do in the future. And let your enthusiasm show. It's contagious. As I'm honoring people, I also just would like to honor Dave Deutsch. Where are you? You're in the audience. Dave Deutsch, there he is. When I was in my early 20s and first starting with this work, he nurtured me, mentored me, and empowered me to continue to grow. So thank you for being here, and thank you for all that you've done.
BRCC TV, the Education Channel.